Beatrice faces her grim conclusion as a harsh voice declares her absolute end. Heartbroken and betrayed, she pleads with Gerald while questioning the love they once shared. Gerald scoffs coldly at the very notion of their romance. Stepping closer, he begins to mercilessly shatter her illusions. He viciously declares that he never held a single drop of affection for her. Revealing his true colors, he dismisses her as a mere stepping stone discarded the moment he secured the crown prince position. Beatrice stares in disbelief as the devastating truth washes over her. A hollow realization settles in her eyes as her spirit finally breaks. She recognizes with bitter clarity that he only ever coveted her status as a duke's daughter rather than her true self. Consumed by despair, she laments her tragic illusion of finding love in her profound loneliness. Gerald offers a mocking note of gratitude while acknowledging her crucial role in his ascent to power. As everything crumbles around her, Beatrice frantically wonders where her path spiraled into disaster. Plunging into darkness, she questions if yearning for affection was her fatal sin. Suddenly, a familiar voice snaps her out of the abyss. Jolting awake with a terrified squeak, she realizes she is inexplicably alive. Staring in shock, she beholds Professor Murphy loudly calling her name. Her mind reels as she remembers that the professor perished long ago. Stuttering in disbelief, Beatrice deduces that she has somehow regressed in time. She takes a moment to process the sheer impossibility of her surroundings. The reality of her younger self and the familiar classroom setting finally sinks in. Professor Murphy sharply reprimands her distraction and demands her absolute focus. He cruelly insults her progress while declaring her a pointless disappointment to the Duke. The agonizing guilt of causing her mother's death is suddenly weaponized against her perceived failure. Condemning her to misery, the professor orders her to dedicate her entire existence to repentance. A young Beatrice silently accepts the harsh verdict with crushing resignation. The adult Beatrice reflects on her traumatic childhood, feeling forever burdened by her mother's fatal weakness. Echoes of past tormentors labeling her a cursed child immediately flood her memory. Trapped by her timid obedience, the young Beatrice could only apologize and endure the endless verbal abuse. The overwhelming weight of her past trauma heavily suffocates her in the present. She gazes ahead to grapple with the sudden rewind of her tragic destiny. Studying her youthful features, she bitterly mocks her own pathetic appearance. Beatrice finally accepts the undeniable truth of her temporal regression. With Gerald's future betrayal fresh in her mind, her second chance feels entirely hollow and meaningless. Bereft of the one anchor she thought she had, absolute despair threatens to consume her anew. Paralyzed by fear, she dreads both abandoning her life and facing the agony of death a second time. Defeated, she questions if she is doomed to suffer this agonizing cycle of endurance forever. Suddenly, a mysterious voice shatters her bleak internal monologue. Beatrice gasps and reels from the impossible intrusion. A towering figure appears behind her with a bold declaration of fatherly reliability. Terrified by the abrupt arrival, Beatrice lets out a startled shriek. Continuing from the tragic climax of Beatrice frantically demands to know who the sudden intruder is and how he breached her room. Squinting at the mysterious figure, she realizes with profound shock that his entire body is utterly transparent. Stumbling backward in sheer terror, she immediately assumes the spectral intruder hovering before her is a ghost. The apparition frantically waves his hands in the air and desperately urges the terrified girl to calm down. He quickly clarifies that he is not a malicious spirit and harbors absolutely no ill will towards her. Assuring her that they are staunch allies, he leaves Beatrice utterly bewildered by his sudden declaration of support. Introducing himself formally, the spectral figure reveals his name is Luca and proudly declares himself a mage. Cutting right to the chase, Luca drops the absolute bombshell that he is the one responsible for regressing her time back to the past. Beatrice stares at him in complete disbelief as her mind violently struggles to process this impossible revelation. Confirming her racing thoughts, Luca explains he went through immense trouble to resurrect her while she stammers about actually being alive again. Spiraling into dark self-deprecation, she demands to know why anyone would save someone so useless who died completely abandoned and betrayed. Consumed by her lingering trauma, she aggressively questions the entire point of this seemingly meaningless and unearned resurrection. Scratching his head awkwardly, Luca admits he hates beating around the bush and decides to skip straight to the ultimate conclusion. He bluntly states that her terrifying father, Duke Leet Luster Wallenstein, actually dotes on her to an extreme and obsessive degree. Beatrice gasps in sheer shock as Luca casually explains that her impending death will cause her father to completely destroy the world in a blind rage. Refusing to believe such an absurd claim, she stutters that it must be a blatant lie because of who her father truly is. She argues that Duke Wallenstein is a renowned and legendary hero who single-handedly saved their nation from a catastrophic crisis 2 years prior. Recalling his overwhelming might, she notes his divine power is so absolute that he is universally praised by all the people. The majestic and intimidating image of her father flashes in her mind as she utters his legendary title as the Duke of Light. Trembling slightly, Beatrice remembers the deeper and much darker truth surrounding their entirely estranged family dynamic. Lowering her gaze in profound sorrow, she firmly believes that her father harbors nothing but deep, unyielding resentment toward her. She tragically rationalizes that since they barely spoke in her previous life, he would never mourn or unleash apocalyptic wrath over her quiet demise. The crushing, enduring guilt of her mother's death firmly anchors Beatrice's unwavering belief that she is completely unworthy of his love. Ignoring her deep-seated doubts, Luca seriously asserts that this violent, world-ending rampage is a horrific reality that actually happened in the future. Utterly overwhelmed by the apocalyptic stakes placed on her shoulders, Beatrice stammers and tries to protest the sheer impossibility of the situation. She insists her fiercely calm father must have had another motive, but Luca counters that all frantic attempts to reason with the enraged Duke completely failed. With all diplomatic efforts utterly shattered by the Duke's wrath, the mages were forced to devise a completely different and drastic approach. Luca dramatically reveals that there is only one singular, desperate method to prevent the radiant Duke from succumbing to utter darkness. To save the entire world from annihilation, the Duke's supposedly despised daughter must simply survive and attain true happiness. Grasping her chest in utter disbelief, Beatrice repeats the word, happy, as if it is a completely foreign and impossible concept for someone like her. Flashing a confident and reassuring smile, Luca points out that gaining a happy, peaceful second life is quite a favorable bargain for her. Her deeply ingrained trauma and profound self-hatred immediately force her to reject his optimistic words entirely. Recalling Gerald's unbelievably cruel betrayal, she bitterly states it would be far more believable if Luca were just manipulating her for political gain. Lowering her eyes in absolute silence, Beatrice remains hopelessly trapped in the suffocating, inescapable shadows of her past betrayals. Acknowledging their massive difference in perspective, Luca smoothly advises her to make her own judgment after finally speaking properly with her father. Shifting back to strict practicality, the spectral mage casually mentions that her second death would cause immense apocalyptic problems for him personally. To definitively prevent the impending destruction of the world, he insists they must implement protective measures and act immediately. Leaning in with terrifyingly sharp intensity, Luca explicitly demands to know the exact identity of the person who brutally murdered her. As Luca explains that the elusive killer masked their magical traces perfectly, the haunting memory of Gerald's cold, calculated rejection violently pierces her mind. Staring directly into the abyss of her fractured memories, Beatrice realizes she must finally confront the phantom of her past to escape her eternal loneliness. Haunted by the memory of her feelings being brutally manipulated, Beatrice begins to panic and retreat. She screams in terrified refusal at the mere thought of cooperating with the spectral mage. Clutching her chest, she desperately vows that she never wants to endure such profound trauma again. Startled by her sudden hyperventilation, Luca frantically asks if she is all right. Realizing her immense distress, he apologizes and gently suggests she rest before they discuss anything further. Raising his hand, the mage begins to channel a soothing, glowing magical aura. A soft and warm light gently envelopes the frantic young girl to calm her shattered nerves. Promising to stay right by her side, Luca reassures her so she can peacefully drift to sleep. He gently murmurs that everything is perfectly fine and she has absolutely nothing to worry about. Drifting off, Beatrice marvels at how safe this ghostly stranger makes her feel despite her overwhelming trauma. The scene abruptly shifts back to the harsh reality of the classroom as the strict teacher aggressively demands she sit down. Beatrice dreads the start of her hellish daily routine while Luca floats nearby and notes the teacher's terrifying demeanor. Observing the strict environment, Luca casually remarks that an adult should be much gentler when dealing with a fragile child. Glancing nervously at the floating mage, Beatrice fears that the professor will notice his close proximity. Luca effortlessly brushes off her concern by revealing that she is the absolute only person capable of seeing him. Oblivious to the spectral intruder, Professor Murphy continues to glare intensely at her trembling student. The cruel teacher demands her attention and viciously claims that the late Duchess cannot rest in peace because of her. Murphy sneeringly laments that the beloved Duchess sacrificed her life to give birth to such a massive failure. Crushed by the verbal abuse, Beatrice apologizes while bitterly reminding herself that she is entirely unworthy of happiness. She desperately holds back her tears, knowing from painful experience that crying will only provoke severe physical punishment. Witnessing her silent agony, Luca drops his casual demeanor and angrily checks on the terrified girl. He furiously questions what kind of twisted abuse this wretched woman is inflicting on a helpless child. Oblivious to the mage's wrath, Professor Murphy aggressively raises her hand to strike the cowering girl. Refusing to let the abuse continue, Luca immediately prepares to intervene with his powerful magic. A sudden and overwhelming magical force begins to violently manifest within the gloomy classroom. Professor Murphy shrieks in sheer terror as the invisible magical pressure violently assaults her senses. Stumbling backward in absolute shock, the bewildered teacher frantically demands to know what is attacking her. She gasps in horror at the sheer audacity of someone deploying unauthorized magic inside the Duke's prestigious household. Immediately shifting the blame, she viciously accuses Beatrice of orchestrating the attack since she is the only other person present. The teacher ruthlessly accuses the terrified child of trying to frighten her out of the mansion despite her desperate denials. Ignoring the teacher's vile delusion, Luca angrily screams at the abusive hag to let go of the trembling girl. Paralyzed by fear, Beatrice desperately prays for the agonizing physical beatings to finally stop once and for all. Unable to bear the escalating chaos, the young girl suddenly screams for everyone to immediately stop. She frantically begs the unseen mage not to make her horrific situation any worse than it already is. Luca hesitates, trying to warn her that completely submitting to the abuse will only result in endless suffering. Recovering her cruel composure, the teacher sneers menacingly at the broken and trembling child. Murphy coldly asks if Beatrice truly intends to defy her after selfishly tearing through her mother's belly to be born. Trapped in a hopeless nightmare, Beatrice realizes that any magical intervention will only guarantee a much more severe punishment later. She internally pleads for a savior while tragically acknowledging that no one would ever bother helping a cursed child like her. Suddenly, the classroom doors burst open as an imposing and unexpected presence violently interrupts the torturous lesson. A powerful voice suddenly demands to know the cause of the commotion. The imposing figure of the Duke steps into the room with an undeniable aura of authority. Beatrice gazes up in absolute shock and breathes out a faint recognition of her father. The Duke glares at the room and fiercely orders a complete explanation of the situation. Professor Murphy stammers out a pathetic excuse, claiming she only intended to punish Beatrice for using magic. Unfazed by her scrambling defense, the Duke coldly asks why such a punishment was even necessary. The terrified tutor desperately tries to justify her actions by citing her authority as a teacher. Shutting her down completely, the Duke sharply retorts that he never granted such absolute authority to a mere tutor. The immense weight of his freezing glare violently pins the professor in place. Hovering nearby, Luca excitedly pumps his fist and declares that the situation is finally turning in their favor. Leaning in closer, the spectral mage urgently reminds Beatrice of the truth he revealed the day before. He confidently guarantees that the Duke truly loves his daughter despite her lingering doubts. Luca frantically urges her to spill every single hateful thing the abusive woman has ever said and done to her. Trembling with uncertainty, Beatrice hesitates while wondering if telling her father the truth would actually change anything. She fears that confessing will only earn her father's disappointment and provoke the professor's wrath later. Suddenly, Professor Murphy furiously screams Beatrice's full name in a desperate attempt to silence her. The desperate tutor viciously berates the young girl for acting like an unfilial daughter. Refusing to let the abuse continue, Luca angrily points out that the Duke rushed in precisely because he sensed her distress and wants to protect her. The frustrated mage scolds Beatrice for hesitating when her father has just demonstrated such undeniable proof of his love. Gripping her dress tightly, Beatrice realizes the ghostly mage might actually be right. She reflects that no one has ever aggressively scolded her out of genuine care before this very moment. Gathering her fractured courage, she wonders if it would be all right to lean on her father just a little bit. Steeling her resolve, Beatrice finally lifts her head to confront the intimidating man standing before her. With a trembling voice, She tentatively calls out to her father while fighting back her deep-seated fear. She firmly clarifies that she does not wish to blame the professor but merely wants to confirm her father's true feelings. Staring directly into his eyes, Beatrice asks the heartbreaking question of whether she was ever truly allowed to be born. A heavy, stunned silence violently crashes down upon the tense classroom. The Duke's expression darkens instantly as he demands to know exactly what she means by those words. Panicking at the impending doom, Professor Murphy desperately tries to interrupt and silence the girl. Without looking away from his daughter, the Duke commands the trembling tutor to remain absolutely silent. Empowered by his protection, Beatrice tearfully confesses that the professor and maids constantly call her a lowly child who tore through her mother's belly. She reveals the devastating lie they fed her every single day, claiming that her father fiercely resented her for her mother's death. Beatrice cries that she tried to become a perfect lady as quickly as possible just to avoid disappointing him any further. The Duke whispers in absolute, horrifying disbelief as the sheer cruelty of the abuse finally registers in his mind. Turning his terrifying gaze toward the cowering tutor, he slowly repeats the vile insult she used against his beloved daughter. Cutting off any chance for mercy, he coldly orders an end to her pathetic nonsense. Watching the Duke manifest a terrifying weapon, Luca frantically warns that the holy sword should only be drawn in times of divine need. Ignoring the mage's panic, the Duke commands the sacred blade to manifest or face being snapped in half. Gripping the legendary weapon with apocalyptic fury, he vows to completely erase the abusive creature from the world. Professor Murphy screams in sheer, absolute terror as the Duke of Light unleashes his blinding wrath. The Duke pauses, realizing that his immediate fury is misplaced and someone is entirely right. Lowering his weapon, he declares that he has no time to waste on such a pathetic creature when he must prioritize Beatrice's care. With a sharp snap of his fingers, he immediately orders his men to gather and aggressively interrogate all the other servants. The terrified tutor drops to her knees and desperately begs the Duke to spare her miserable life. Ignoring the pathetic pleas for mercy, the towering father turns his full attention back to his trembling daughter. Kneeling down to her eye level, he gently states that he first needs to clear up a massive misunderstanding. He firmly assures her that she is his beloved only daughter and the precious child his late wife left behind, completely refuting the cruel insults. Reaching out with profound tenderness, he softly calls out Beatrice's name. Gazing into her wide eyes, he unequivocally declares that he loves her from the absolute bottom of his heart. He emphasizes his immense affection by dramatically stating that he cherishes her so deeply it transcends all logic. Panicking slightly as tears begin to stream down her face, he hurriedly apologizes for making her cry. Sniffling softly, Beatrice stammers as she struggles to process this overwhelming wave of pure affection. She cries tears of absolute joy, confessing that she wept only because she is finally happy after believing he resented her for so long. Acknowledging his massive failure, the Duke takes full responsibility for neglecting her under the guise of his busy schedule. Bowing his head in deep remorse, the mighty Duke of Light offers a sincere and unconditional apology to his young child. Pulling her into a warm and fiercely protective embrace, he finally gives her the fatherly comfort she has always craved. Resting against his chest, Beatrice realizes she had been blinding herself to the reality of his genuine love. A profound sense of peace washes over her as she finally accepts that she was truly allowed to be born. Exhausted by the overwhelming emotional release, the young girl peacefully drifts to sleep in her father's safe arms. The Duke gazes down at his slumbering daughter with a heavy and guilt-ridden expression. He silently berates himself for allowing Beatrice to suffer so needlessly under his own roof. Resolving to change their future, he vows that his only true desire is for her to simply be happy without having to prove herself. His expression darkens into terrifying fury as he realizes how the mansion's staff plotted behind his back to ruthlessly torment her. A suffocating and violently oppressive magical aura violently erupts from his towering frame. With eyes burning with absolute wrath, he menacingly declares that a thorough and merciless investigation is now inevitable. Sitting at the dining table, Beatrice nervously stammers to get her father's attention. The imposing Duke pauses his actions and softly asks what is on her mind. Blushing awkwardly, she points out that she is perfectly capable of eating by herself while enduring his intense stare. Sweat dropping from the sheer awkwardness, she internally questions the bizarre nature of this situation. The Duke instantly deflates in visible dejection and quietly acknowledges her request. Panicking at his sudden sadness, Beatrice frantically backpedals and claims the food tastes much better when he feeds her. Instantly perking up, the Duke flashes a soft smile and happily agrees to continue. As he gently feeds her, he cheerfully thinks to himself that his daughter is absolutely adorable no matter what she does. Observing his overwhelming affection, Beatrice reflects that her father never spoiled her like this in her previous life. She silently wonders how the dynamic between them changed so drastically overnight just by clearing up a misunderstanding. Suddenly, a polite voice interrupts the tender moment, urging the Duke to keep his extreme doting in moderation. Beatrice glances over and recognizes the newcomer as Julius Hank Carson, the Duke's official secretary. Remembering their lack of interaction in her past life, she nervously prays that Julius does not secretly resent her birth. Julius kindly reassures the confused girl and smoothly asks her to indulge the Duke's overwhelming affection. While the Duke threatens to sever the secretary's head, Julius calmly explains that his grace had held back for years because she used to cry in fear whenever he approached. Pivoting the conversation, Julius announces they have summoned a trading company and urges Beatrice to request absolutely anything she desires. Touched by the grand gesture, the young lady softly expresses her heartfelt gratitude. Julius gently waves off her thanks and politely redirects her to express her gratitude to his grace instead. Gazing up at her towering father, Beatrice is deeply moved that he would go to such incredible lengths to treat her so well. Completely flustered by the sheer volume of his love, she struggles to formulate a proper response. Clapping his hands to refocus them, Julius advises her to eat properly and build her strength for a very busy day ahead. Beatrice tilts her head in sheer confusion, wondering what could possibly make the day so busy. The scene abruptly shifts as the Duke proudly introduces her to a lavish new bedroom, leaving Beatrice stammering in utter shock. He firmly declares there is absolutely no need for her to remain in a room heavily tainted by her past suffering. Staring at the opulent space, Beatrice silently agrees and acknowledges the heavy burden of her painful memories. However, she sweat drops as she takes in the staggering luxury, feeling the upgrade is entirely too massive for someone like her. Stepping forward, Julius formally announces that he will now introduce her new, hand-picked personal servants. Beatrice is completely floored upon realizing that every servant boasts an impossibly impressive resume, with some even serving at the imperial castle. The grand tour continues as a sharply dressed man formally greets the Duke and Lady Beatrice with a deep bow. The enthusiastic man introduces himself and graciously thanks the noble family for choosing the Fiamma Trading Company. Gasping in sheer disbelief, Beatrice instantly recognizes the man as the highly influential chairman of the famous trading guild. Gesturing grandly to his inventory, the chairman explains they brought their finest dresses and toys perfectly suited for the young lady. The Duke instantly commands them to craft 50 brand new custom dresses, prompting the chairman to eagerly promise a top designer at a later date. A breathtaking mountain of expensive goods and lavish gifts is proudly displayed before the overwhelmed child. Beatrice stares in wide-eyed wonder, completely mesmerized by the sheer scale of the extravagant presents. Taking in the magnificent sight, she slowly turns her attention toward the vast assortment of plush gifts. The Duke leans in with a warm, tender expression and softly asks if a particular stuffed toy catches her eye. Blushing deeply, Beatrice shyly murmurs that its pure white fur heavily reminds her of her father. Suddenly panicked by her own casualness, she frantically flusters about and apologizes for saying something potentially rude. Deeply struck by her innocent comparison, the Duke sucks in a sharp breath of air and intensely calls out the chairman's name. The Duke suddenly demands exclusive rights to the white bear stuffed toy. He casually offers to pay an astronomical sum of 100,000 gold annually for the exclusivity, which the chairman happily accepts. Overwhelmed by the absurd proposition, Beatrice stammers that her father really does not need to go that far. She sweats nervously as she realizes that terrifying amounts of money are being casually thrown around just for her sake. Ignoring her protests, the Duke tenderly places the large, fluffy white bear directly into her small arms. With a warm smile, he formally declares that the special toy now belongs entirely to her. While she is thrilled to have the bear, Beatrice feels completely lost on how to properly respond to such extreme devotion. The scene suddenly transitions into a flashback of the previous night. The narrative highlights the quiet aftermath of the chaotic evening as the Duke intensely watches over his sleeping daughter. Holding her small hand, he gravely accepts full responsibility for allowing his child to suffer in such awful circumstances. He solemnly vows to exchange more words and physical affection with her to ensure no one can ever take advantage of her again. Beatrice shifts slightly in her sleep and softly murmurs the word, "Father," in her dreams. Struck by her sheer cuteness, the Duke weakly asks his secretary if he can just put off his impending work until later. Julius instantly rejects the request, firmly reminding the Duke that they are extremely busy cleaning up the mess caused by the foolish servants. Defeated by his secretary's absolute logic, the Duke reluctantly agrees to handle his duties. Suddenly shifting gears, the Duke glares menacingly at Julius and threatens to gouge his eyes out. He furiously accuses the secretary of inappropriately looking at Beatrice's adorable sleeping face. Julius chuckles nervously, pointing out that treating an unmarried daughter with such extreme overprotectiveness is incredibly rude if he intends for her to marry someday. The very concept of Beatrice getting married violently shatters the Duke's composure. Realizing his massive mistake, Julius frantically apologizes and begs the stunned father to forget he ever mentioned marriage. The flashback ends as the conversation shifts back to the grim investigation, with the Duke demanding to know how rotten the mansion's staff truly was. Julius reports that while the knights remained loyal, nearly all the servants were compromised because they chose to ignore the ongoing abuse. The Duke sighs heavily and demands to know exactly who was leading this massive household conspiracy. Julius reveals that the ringleaders were the long-serving servants who respected the late Duchess so much that they twisted their grief into resentment toward Beatrice. Closing his eyes in disgust, the Duke states that they merely trampled on his late wife's true feelings and falsely called it respect. He bitterly scoffs at their convenient misuse of the word to justify their cruel actions. With cold finality, he orders Julius to cut away every single rotten part of the household staff. Julius acknowledges the ruthless purge but mentions they still have not identified the source of the magical attack that occurred inside the mansion. The Duke notes that since the magic directly targeted the abusive tutor, someone inside must have been secretly trying to protect Beatrice. Deciding to prioritize the immediate threat, he orders Julius to put the magic investigation on hold and focus entirely on questioning the servants. The scene shifts back to the present night, where an exhausted Beatrice lies alone in her lavish new bed. She sighs deeply while reflecting on just how incredibly hectic and overwhelming the entire day has been. A familiar, translucent figure suddenly materializes right beside her bed. Beatrice stares up in surprise as she immediately recognizes the magical presence of her spectral ally. Sitting up slightly, she curiously asks Luca where he has been hiding this entire time. Luca rubs the back of his head and vaguely claims he has just been floating around here and there. Lowering her gaze, Beatrice hesitates for a moment before bringing up the chaotic events of the previous day. She sincerely thanks the spectral mage, acknowledging that his intervention helped her find the courage to realize her painful mistake. Although still deeply bewildered by her father's intense love, she firmly resolves that she can no longer live in a way that disrespects the people who treasure her. Clutching her blankets tightly, Beatrice vows that she must never again lament the simple fact that she is alive. Beatrice notes that she still doesn't fully understand the world destruction prophecy but is genuinely glad for a second chance. Gazing ahead, she firmly declares her profound desire to live and finally attain happiness. She asks Luca if his promise from the previous day remains valid. Looking directly at him, she earnestly asks for his help to simply survive. Admitting her own clumsy and timid nature, she confesses that his presence makes her feel undeniably safe. Luca stares at her, deeply moved by her vulnerability. He enthusiastically accepts her plea, waving his hands and telling her to leave absolutely everything to him. Pointing proudly to himself, the spectral mage declares that helping her is the exact reason he traveled all this way. Deciding to start fresh, he prepares to introduce himself properly. Posing confidently, he announces himself as Luca the super genius mage and eagerly looks forward to working with her. Beatrice smiles softly and respectfully returns the greeting. She expresses her relief at having such a reliable ally by her side before hesitantly broaching a difficult topic. Trembling slightly, she acknowledges that recalling the memory might be frightening. Luca listens intently, his expression shifting to a serious demeanor. He gently prompts her, asking if she is finally ready to reveal the identity of her killer. Steeling her resolve, Beatrice prepares to name the culprit from her doomed future. She definitively states that the second prince, Gerald Rosso-Luce, was the one who murdered her. Luca's eyes widen in sheer, absolute shock. Sweating nervously, the mage stammers that she must be kidding, completely baffled as to why the prince would ever kill her. Beatrice grimly explains that Gerald merely used her to secure the throne and then discarded her once she lost her usefulness. Processing this revelation, Beatrice notes that Luca's emotional reaction is surprisingly intense. Luca mutters that Gerald had seemed completely calm and composed while cooperating with them to soothe the enraged Duke in the future. Beatrice gasps in surprise, realizing that Luca actually met the prince. Luca confirms their meeting, noting that Gerald appeared to be the person most troubled by the Duke's apocalyptic rampage. A new wave of anxiety washes over Beatrice as she considers the implications of Gerald knowing Luca's plan. She fears that if the prince discovers the time travel plot, he will instantly become wary of her and take preemptive action. Luca confidently reassures her that Gerald knows absolutely nothing about the regression, mentioning there are only 2 other secret collaborators. He fiercely promises to prioritize her survival above all else, even if his future allies suddenly turn against them. Beatrice looks at him in mild surprise, touched by his unwavering dedication. The mage reiterates that his ultimate goal is preventing the world's destruction, making her safety his absolute highest priority. Smiling gently, Luca thanks her for pushing through the pain to share such a traumatic truth. Reminding her of reality, he advises her to get ready since the Duke will likely summon her soon. Beatrice murmurs his name softly, grateful for his steadfast support. As Luca fades away, she realizes he has left her alone with her thoughts. She reflects deeply on the sudden shift in her circumstances. Overwhelmed by gratitude, she acknowledges how truly blessed she is to receive such kindness from both Luca and her father. A small smile graces her lips as she fully embraces her newfound hope. Determined to repay their warmth, she resolves to find a way to give something meaningful back to them. 2 months flash by in a blur of peace, leaving her frantic over what to do next. She nervously realizes that her fated encounter with Gerald is rapidly approaching, forcing her to confront her greatest nightmare head-on. The scene opens with a silent, tense atmosphere as Beatrice contemplates her approaching doom. Luca casually suggests simply ignoring the prince, but Beatrice firmly declares that such an action is completely impossible. She anxiously explains that Gerald will bypass all formalities and come directly to the mansion. Processing this, Luca confidently predicts that the Duke would just chase the intruder away anyway. Flashing back to the Duke's absurd overprotectiveness, Luca notes that the fiercely doting father would never let anyone harm her. Flustered by his teasing, Beatrice lightly scolds the mage for predicting she will become a spoiled young lady. Lowering her gaze, she tragically admits that she unfortunately cannot rely on her father for this specific crisis. She recalls that during the last timeline, her father was away on an expedition, forcing her to handle Gerald's visit entirely on her own. Luca finally understands how she and the second prince originally met. Beatrice quietly confirms his realization with a heavy heart. Looking back, she harshly criticizes her own poor crisis management for growing so close to him after that fateful visit. She tragically notes that Gerald was the very first person to ever speak kindly to her back then. Grasping the full picture, Luca concludes that her ultimate goal is to avoid any contact with the royal. Flashing a confident grin, the spectral mage promises to try and do something about her predicament. Surprised by his sudden confidence, Beatrice hesitantly asks if he truly has a plan. Luca explains that one of his secret collaborators has ties to the second prince, so he will go ask them for help. Promising to be right back, he playfully tells her to be a good girl while he handles the situation. Beatrice timidly wishes him a safe trip as he prepares to depart. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door shatters the quiet room. The familiar, deep voice of her father calls out her name from the hallway. Gasping slightly, Beatrice immediately recognizes his imposing presence. The Duke politely asks if she has a moment to discuss an important matter. Stuttering slightly in her haste, she quickly invites him inside. Stepping into the room with a young companion, the Duke commands the boy to introduce himself. A spirited youth steps forward and proudly announces himself as Aegis Blitzmont, her newly appointed guard knight. Bowing deeply, the young knight expresses his immense eagerness to serve her. Beatrice stares in slight bewilderment at the energetic newcomer. Her father steps in and formally explains his sudden decision to assign her a personal guard. He reasons that having a highly capable companion close to her age will help her feel much more at ease. Touched by his ongoing consideration, Beatrice softly thanks him for the gesture. She warmly welcomes Aegis while silently wondering if she had caused her father unnecessary worry once again. Aegis beams with pride, loudly declaring it an absolute honor to protect her. The Duke watches their interaction with a solemn, unreadable expression. Beatrice tilts her head, internally questioning the true reason behind this abrupt security upgrade. Sensing her confusion, the Duke gravely announces the main reason for his visit. He reluctantly reveals that he will be leaving on an expedition tomorrow and cannot stay by her side. Stunned by the immediate timeline, Beatrice stammers out the word, tomorrow, in shock. She panics internally, having expected the expedition soon but never anticipating it to happen this abruptly. Lowering his head apologetically, the Duke admits he should have told her much sooner. He confesses with profound guilt that the mere thought of making her feel lonely prevented him from breaking the news. Beatrice tosses in her sleep while desperately pleading with someone not to apologize. Jolting awake with a sharp gasp, she suddenly escapes the suffocating grip of her distressing dream. Reaching up to her face, she gently wipes away the lingering tears from her eyes. Staring down at her trembling hands, she attempts to process the sudden wave of profound emotion. Sitting entirely alone in her dark bedroom, she continues to cry silently without understanding the cause. Confused by her own intense reaction, she softly questions why she is shedding these sorrowful tears. A sudden moment of clarity washes over her as she finally grasps the true nature of her heavy heart. Clutching her chest tightly, she sorrowfully admits to herself that she just feels incredibly lonely. She bitterly scolds herself for being pathetic and feels frustrated that her mature adult mind still succumbs to a child's weeping. Her thoughts drift to a recent memory where her father apologized for his sudden departure due to highly active monsters. The towering Duke urged her to maintain her health and firmly instructed her to rely entirely on Julius for any troubles. Standing bravely before him, Beatrice sincerely wished for her father to take good care of himself during the dangerous expedition. Turning back slightly, the imposing Duke quietly and solemnly acknowledged her heartfelt farewell. Reflecting on the exchange, Beatrice realizes she only understood the true weight of affection after finally experiencing it firsthand. She deeply concludes that once someone directs genuine love toward you, their very existence becomes unimaginably important to your soul. Despite her initial bewilderment at such sudden affection, she happily recognizes that her father's mere presence brings her profound joy. Gazing ahead with a gentle smile, she desperately wants her father to experience that exact same boundless happiness. Pondering her options, she wonders what a small and seemingly powerless child like her could possibly do to repay his kindness. A warm resolve completely settles in her heart as she decides the absolute best gift is to answer his love with her own. Flashing back to the exact moment of his departure, the young girl suddenly called out to stop him in his tracks. Looking up with absolute sincerity and courage, she openly and confidently declared her pure love for him. The mighty Duke stood completely frozen in absolute shock at his young daughter's sudden and innocent confession. Smiling brightly to herself in the present, Beatrice vows to endlessly repeat those exact words of affection from now on. She fiercely promises that her newly discovered devotion will never lose to the overwhelming love he constantly showers upon her. Time effortlessly slips away as the narrative shifts forward by a quiet and relatively uneventful 2 months. She happily notes that she spent those tranquil days peacefully waiting for her beloved father to return home from the battlefield. Sitting entirely alone in her room, she quietly mutters how much she misses him and earnestly wishes for his swift return. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes against her bedroom door and instantly shatters the peaceful silence. Julius urgently enters the room and politely excuses himself to deliver an incredibly pressing and unexpected report. Startled by his unusually tense demeanor, Beatrice immediately demands to know what has just happened. Panic instantly grips her fragile heart as she frantically asks if something terrible has befallen her father on the distant expedition. Julius firmly maintains a deadly serious expression as he prepares to deliver the shocking and terrifying news. Bowing formally, the stern secretary loudly announces the horrifying arrival of His Highness, the second Prince Gerald Rosso-Luce. Hearing the terrifying name, Beatrice gasps in absolute shock. Julius smoothly explains that the prince mistakenly boarded a duchy-bound carriage while trying to sneak into the castle town. The secretary adds that Gerald is now requesting to wait at the mansion until an official escort arrives. Trembling slightly, Beatrice internally notes that inviting him in is the standard model answer for a noble. Gripping her dress in sheer terror, she realizes just how utterly paralyzing the thought of meeting Gerald truly is. Panic consumes her as she wonders if she is hopelessly destined to be murdered by him once again. Floating nearby, an equally frantic Luca questions how this happened when his allies promised to keep the prince away. Watching the spectral mage panic, Beatrice despairs over this completely unexpected crisis. She lowers her head and bitterly laments her absolute powerlessness in the face of looming doom. Desperate for any guidance, she stammers her secretary's name while struggling to breathe. Julius steps forward and calmly addresses his distressed young lady. He seamlessly shifts the focus back to Prince Gerald's highly problematic presence at their gates. Without a hint of hesitation, Julius boldly offers to personally escort the unwanted royal back to the imperial castle. Beatrice looks up with wide, shocked eyes at the unexpectedly assertive proposal. Maintaining his perfect composure, Julius rationalizes that they simply cannot invite a guest inside while the master is away. When Beatrice nervously argues that Gerald is royalty, Julius coldly dismisses her concern as entirely irrelevant. He confidently asserts that absolutely no one dares complain since the master of their household is the legendary Duke of Light. Pausing to think, Beatrice realizes her father's actual political and martial authority likely eclipses the imperial family itself. Julius further explains that His Grace fiercely despises letting anyone near her, especially other men. Taken aback by this revelation, Beatrice softly questions if her father is truly that overprotective. Julius stares down at her with unwavering, serious intensity. He challenges her to think about why the Duke keeps the mansion gates permanently locked and forbids her from going outside. Softening his gaze, the secretary firmly declares that every extreme measure is strictly designed to protect her. Beatrice gasps as the profound weight of her father's silent guardianship suddenly washes over her. She reflects that her old, traumatized self would have foolishly assumed he hid her away out of deep shame. Gripping the fabric over her racing heart, she lets go of her lingering doubts. A bright wave of clarity finally illuminates her troubled mind. Tears prick her eyes as she fully embraces the undeniable truth that her father genuinely loves her. Looking up with renewed strength, she realizes she no longer has to carry her heavy burdens entirely alone. Empowered by the Duke's unseen shield, she decides it is time to stop lamenting her own weakness. Steadying her trembling voice, she firmly calls out to her loyal secretary. With unshakable resolve, Beatrice officially orders Julius to escort Prince Gerald far away from their home. Julius bows deeply and formally accepts the command without a second thought. The suffocating tension finally dissipates, leaving behind a peaceful and quiet resolve. Suddenly, Julius breaks his stoic facade with a sharp, terrified gasp. Sweating profusely, he frantically begs her to keep the fact that he briefly held her hand a total secret from the Duke to avoid literal decapitation. Smiling warmly at his sheer panic, Beatrice gently promises to keep his minor transgressions safely hidden. Julius continues to hyperventilate and desperately insists he is completely unready to visit the afterlife. Beatrice watches her highly capable secretary completely melt down in absolute terror. Tilting her head in pure innocence, she genuinely wonders why Julius is so afraid of a man she views as incredibly kind. Beatrice points out that her father is very strict with everyone else, but Julius protests that his gentleness is reserved exclusively for her. Shifting her attention away from their banter, Beatrice notices Julius fiercely arguing with the second prince. Gerald stands his ground outside the gates, maintaining a calm but insistent demeanor as he speaks with the frustrated secretary. Peeking from a safe distance, Beatrice anxiously wonders why Gerald simply refuses to leave the premises. Floating beside her, Luca bluntly states that the prince obviously just wants to make direct contact with her. A wave of dread washes over Beatrice as she wonders if Gerald was already plotting his ruthless ascension to emperor from such a young age. Trapped in her dark memories, she tragically questions how he endured staying beside someone he never truly loved for so many years. Suddenly, a loud commotion interrupts her thoughts, causing Luca to glance over in mild surprise. The heavy mansion gates violently rattle as a grand carriage abruptly pulls up to the entrance. Recognizing the extravagant design, Beatrice gasps in confusion upon realizing the carriage belongs to the imperial family. The carriage door swings open, revealing a highly dignified and imposing figure stepping out into the sunlight. A towering young man with long, elegant hair makes a grand entrance, immediately commanding the attention of everyone present. Floating nearby, Luca groans in absolute annoyance and mutters that the newcomer is just as pretentious as ever. The majestic young man turns his gaze directly toward Beatrice and the invisible mage hovering right beside her. He smoothly raises his hand and waves gracefully, seemingly making direct eye contact with the spectral mage. Beatrice watches the interaction in pure disbelief, realizing that this imperial newcomer can actually see Luca. Luca confirms her suspicion, proudly revealing that the majestic man is actually one of his secret collaborators. Flashing a confident smirk, the mage teases that even a sheltered young lady like her should easily recognize this prominent figure. Beatrice stares in absolute shock, never having imagined that Luca's mysterious ally would be someone of such immense status. She identifies the towering man as the first prince of the empire. A sense of awe washes over her as she speaks the name of Prince Granz. She quickly deduces that in this current era, Prince Granz holds significantly more real political power than Gerald. A wave of profound relief floods her heart as she realizes that having Prince Granz as an ally is incredibly reassuring. Later inside the mansion, Julius approaches Beatrice and notes that since Prince Gerald has finally departed, they have pressing matters to handle. The stressed secretary nervously admits that he must now report the highly volatile incident with the second prince directly to his grace. Sweating profusely, Julius begs Beatrice to deliver the report herself, desperately hoping her presence will prevent the Duke from flying into a murderous rage. Beatrice kindly agrees to help but curiously asks how they plan to contact her father while he is far away on an expedition. Julius presents a specialized device, explaining that they must use this magical tool because any matter involving the imperial family requires urgent communication. The narrative briefly explains that magic tools are a general term for various objects powered by magical energy. Beatrice realizes this specific device is a communication tool designed to share voices and images across vast distances. Channeling his magical energy into the artifact, Julius warns her to keep the report brief since his power can only sustain the connection for 30 minutes. The magic tool suddenly activates, emitting a bright, humming glow as the magical connection establishes itself. Julius assures the young lady that the transmission should successfully connect to the other side very soon. The magical projection flickers to life, suddenly displaying a horrifying image of the Duke entirely drenched in thick blood. The Duke violently glares into the projection and menacingly growls out his secretary's name. Julius immediately shrieks in sheer terror at the absolutely terrifying blood-soaked visage of his master. Startled by the sudden scream, the Duke finally notices his precious daughter standing right beside the panicking secretary. Instantly dropping his menacing aura, the Duke frantically scolds Julius for not warning him sooner, terrified that his gruesome appearance might cause Beatrice to collapse in shock. Sweating nervously while staring at the undeniable blood spatter, Beatrice bravely assures her frantic father that she is perfectly fine. Stealing her resolve, she looks directly into the magical projection and announces that she has a very important report to share. Looking into the magical projection, Beatrice nervously reports that the second prince visited the mansion earlier. She explains his carriage mistake and requests to stay, causing her father to instantly suspect an imperial plot against his daughter. Dismissing the request as utterly absurd, the fiercely protective Duke commands them to turn the royal away immediately. Julius confirms that imperial officials already retrieved the boy and promised a formal apology at a later date. A sudden, oppressive silence falls as the Duke glares intensely through the magical feed. Shifting his terrifying focus, he sharply demands to know if his secretary handled the delicate matter personally. Julius freezes in sheer terror under his master's withering, murderous gaze. Sweating profusely, the frantic secretary violently denies letting the prince near Beatrice and desperately begs for her corroboration. Stepping in smoothly, Beatrice confirms that Julius bravely stood at the front and handled the entire ordeal for her. The Duke reluctantly accepts this fact while Beatrice notes she merely watched the chaos from the safety of her room. Relieved, the mighty Duke casually orders his daughter to dump all future unpleasantness directly onto the horrified secretary. Narrowing his eyes slightly, the Duke hesitantly asks what Beatrice thought when she saw the young royal. Utterly bewildered by the strange question, Beatrice pauses in total confusion. She stammers helplessly, completely unsure of what her father is implying or how to properly answer. The Duke awkwardly mutters that since she is growing up, he worried she might finally take an interest in the opposite sex. Beatrice stares blankly at the projection, completely failing to grasp his overwhelming paternal jealousy. She quickly denies any romantic interest, while Julius silently notes the Duke's sheer terror of losing his precious daughter to another man. Beatrice admits she felt incredibly nervous because Gerald stubbornly refused to leave even after his carriage was arranged. Julius chimes in to add that the prince kept insisting on personally thanking the young lady before departing. The secretary teasingly suggests the prince might have actually fallen for her, instantly triggering the Duke to declare his immediate return. Julius gasps in absolute shock at his master's sudden and entirely irrational decree. Ignoring his soldiers' panicked reminders about the ongoing monster subjugation, the Duke vows to handle the threat himself and leave today. He frantically orders Beatrice to lock her doors tightly and await his arrival by tomorrow morning. Complete chaos instantly erupts on the battlefield as soldiers scream for everyone to flee from the Duke's apocalyptic holy sword. Beatrice gazes softly at the chaotic projection of her fiercely devoted father. Smiling warmly, she happily acknowledges just how deeply he worries about her safety. She gently tells him to take care and promises to eagerly await his safe return home. The Duke's terrifying demeanor instantly melts into a solemn, tender promise to return to her side. The magical projection finally blinks out and leaves the grand room in quiet stillness. Sitting alone, Beatrice admits her lingering anxiety over the royal visit but expresses deep gratitude for surviving it unscathed. She humbly credits her ongoing safety entirely to her father and the loyal staff protecting her. However, a crushing wave of guilt quickly replaces her relief as she laments her own absolute powerlessness. Staring down in despair, she fears that relying solely on others will inevitably drag her back toward her original, tragic fate. Desperate to change her destiny, she urgently wonders how she can stop being such a massive burden to everyone she loves. The scene abruptly shifts to the dead of night as a massive hand gently strokes Beatrice's hair. Stirring from her deep, peaceful slumber, the young girl murmurs softly into the darkness. Blinking her sleepy eyes, she groggily recognizes her father's towering silhouette sitting right beside her bed. The imposing Duke immediately apologizes for waking her up and softly urges her to go back to sleep. Still half asleep, Beatrice confusedly points out that he promised to arrive in the morning rather than the middle of the night. The Duke casually reveals he simply crossed the entire mountain on foot to arrive early, leaving her utterly bewildered by his impossible feat. Beatrice nervously realizes that traveling at night and climbing a steep mountain means her father pushed himself dangerously hard. Overcome with sudden guilt, she wonders if her own unreliability caused her father to become heavily burdened once again. Gazing warmly at him, she gently points out that since he must be completely exhausted, he should be the one resting. The Duke affectionately smiles and replies that simply looking at his beloved daughter's face makes all of his fatigue instantly vanish. He warmly reminds Beatrice that she is still a growing child who desperately needs her precious sleep. She silently notes how incredibly cool and pleasant her father's massive hand feels against her skin. Snuggling deeper into her warm bed, she admits that his gentle presence makes her feel undeniably safe. However, a quiet resolve forms as she desperately wishes for him to never push himself or face danger for her sake ever again. Clenching her fists in pure determination, she decides she must gain the strength to protect herself instead of solely relying on others. Suddenly, a massive shock violently interrupts her thoughts, causing her to gasp in utter bewilderment. Waking up fully, she stammers as she attempts to comprehend the completely unexpected situation unfolding in her bright bedroom. A towering, elegant young man stares down at her with a remarkably calm and collected expression. The majestic newcomer casually introduces himself as Granz Ray Luce, the first prince of the empire, noting this is their first proper meeting. Flashing a charming smile, Prince Granz smoothly apologizes for his younger brother's extremely rude behavior from the other day. Beatrice processes this surreal reality, entirely stunned that the first prince is casually standing in her room right as she wakes up. Gathering her scattered composure, she politely introduces herself and formally expresses her absolute honor at meeting him. Prince Granz chuckles in genuine amusement, praising the young lady's intelligence and easily understanding why the Duke dotes on her so fiercely. Glaring daggers at the royal intruder, the Duke violently demands that the prince finish his business and leave immediately. Unfazed by the suffocating killing intent, Granz smoothly reminds the Duke that he personally requested an apology and a new tutor for Beatrice. The fiercely protective father snaps back that simply sending a random tutor would have completely sufficed without the prince arriving in person. Prince Granz calmly counters that he genuinely wanted to apologize for his brother directly while also delivering the requested tutor. Startled by the sudden mention of education, Beatrice tilts her head and repeats the word, tutor, in mild confusion. Granz explicitly explains that the Duke demanded an exceptionally virtuous candidate completely disconnected from the late Duchess. Realizing her father's deep consideration, Beatrice notes he is actively making sure she never faces another abusive teacher like Professor Murphy. She shudders as she recalls the sheer torment of constantly being blamed for her mother's death by the previous rotten staff. Smiling mysteriously, Prince Granz abruptly declares that if he were to leave now, the Duke's specific promise would remain entirely unfulfilled. Leaning in closer with an air of absolute, undeniable confidence, Granz prepares to reveal his true intentions to the bewildered room. Pointing to himself with a dramatic flourish, the first prince proudly announces that he will personally serve as Beatrice's brand new tutor. Beatrice and her father both freeze in sheer, unadulterated shock at the utterly absurd and unexpected declaration. Stuttering in absolute disbelief, Beatrice loudly questions why His Highness would ever personally take on such a lowly role. Granz smoothly rationalizes that absolutely no one in the entire empire fits the Duke's insanely strict conditions better than himself. The Duke stares intensely, radiating immense frustration but remaining completely unable to refute the prince's flawless logic. Focusing solely on the bewildered young girl, Granz softly asks Beatrice to boldly reveal her true desires. Vowing to never cause her the profound sadness his brother inflicted, the first prince sincerely waits for her to voice her ultimate goal. Empowered by his genuine offer, Beatrice firmly declares her desperate wish to finally protect herself without burdening the people around her. She internally notes that borrowing the absolute power of Prince Granz, one of Luca's secret collaborators, would be incredibly reassuring for her survival. Extending his hand with a warm, inviting gaze, Granz confidently asks if she is ready to accept his powerful guidance. Beatrice gazes deeply at his outstretched hand, feeling a massive wave of hope completely wash over her fractured spirit. Grasping his hand with fierce determination, she happily accepts his offer and begs him to teach her everything. The chapter closes on a charming bonus illustration, showcasing a quiet, chaotic incident that unfolded while the Duke was away on his expedition. Grateful for the company while her father is away on an expedition, Beatrice kindly thanks Sir Aegis. Standing tall, the young knight enthusiastically declares that it is an absolute honor to spend time with his lady. Despite his cheerful energy, Beatrice internally admits feeling quite nervous because she barely knows him. A quiet and slightly awkward silence settles between the two as they sit in the grand room. Suddenly, Aegis snaps to attention as his sharp instincts flare at an unseen anomaly. Sensing a strange disturbance, the highly alert knight urgently warns Beatrice to step back. A faint, mystical presence begins to subtly materialize into the tense atmosphere. Completely oblivious to the knight's defensive stance, Luca cheerfully announces his return to the mansion. Aegis violently jolts back in shock, shouting loudly to demand who is suddenly intruding upon them. Glancing around frantically at the empty air, the confused knight mutters that he definitely sensed something there. Beatrice watches with wide eyes, slowly realizing exactly what her new guard is fiercely reacting to. She panics internally upon discovering that the young knight can somehow sense Luca's invisible magical presence. Dodging the knight's frantic sweeps, Luca notes that freakishly sharp instincts occasionally exist in certain people. Sweating heavily, the spectral mage complains that the guard's keen senses will completely ruin his ability to plan for the future. Desperate to avoid further detection, Luca frantically begs Beatrice to do something to distract the hyper-alert knight. Stuttering slightly under the immense pressure, she nervously calls out to Sir Aegis to capture his attention. She desperately claims that a protective ghost simply haunts the historic mansion, a flimsy excuse Luca immediately assumes will fail. To their absolute shock, the gullible knight instantly buys the story while Beatrice and Luca sigh in immense relief. Dropping to his knees, Aegis earnestly apologizes to the honorable ghost and loudly promises to respect it moving forward. Beatrice points out exactly where the unseen ghost is currently standing while pondering the deeply bizarre situation. Despite her lingering confusion, she smiles softly and concludes that the eccentric knight does not seem like a bad person after all. Stepping forward with confident grace, Prince Granz declares his intention to formally introduce himself. He smoothly assures the young lady that he arrived solely to protect her, revealing himself as one of Luca's secret time-traveling allies. Overwhelmed by his reassurance, Beatrice stammers out her profound and heartfelt gratitude. Hovering nearby, the spectral Luca eagerly vouches for the first prince's absolute trustworthiness. Acknowledging their united front, Beatrice firmly accepts this revelation with a quiet nod. Wasting no time, Granz officially begins their lesson by noting that her retained memories render basic etiquette and academic studies entirely unnecessary. He calmly asks what she actually wishes to learn, leaving Beatrice briefly pondering her options. Gathering her courage, she acknowledges the widespread rumors praising His Highness for his exceptional mastery of both swordsmanship and magic. Looking directly into his eyes, She earnestly requests that he teach her the art of self-defense. Taken aback by the unexpected request, Granz repeats the words with a hint of confusion. He gently reminds her that she is already fiercely protected by him, Luca, and the Duke, making physical combat skills entirely unnecessary. Dropping her gaze in frustration, Beatrice struggles to accept his protective dismissal. Clenching her fists, she passionately shouts that she absolutely despises being a constant burden to everyone around her. Stunned by her raw emotional outburst, the first prince gazes at her in silent realization. Releasing a soft sigh, Granz finally relents and agrees to her heartfelt plea. He strictly warns her to only learn enough to protect herself and vehemently forbids her from seeking out unnecessary battles. Leaning in with an authoritative gaze, he demands her absolute compliance with his strict condition. Beaming with renewed hope, Beatrice enthusiastically agrees and profusely thanks her new tutor. Granz crosses his arms, silently analyzing the best approach to train the fragile young girl. He logically concludes that teaching her magic is the most practical route since he cannot realistically hand her a heavy sword. Beatrice flinches and frantically apologizes, confessing that she possesses absolutely no magical talent after failing every single past lesson. She bitterly curses her own pathetic nature for demanding a tutor while completely lacking the necessary skills to succeed. Cutting through her spiral of self-hatred, Granz sharply calls out her name with undeniable authority. He fiercely orders her to immediately discard every cruel lie her abusive former tutor ever fed her. Reaching out with his glowing magical energy, he decides to personally analyze her latent abilities. Dazzling magical sparkles manifest around Beatrice as the prince peers deep into her hidden potential. Stepping back, Granz confirms that her raw magical power is actually enormous, though traditional spellcasting would indeed prove extremely difficult. Misinterpreting his assessment, Beatrice slumps in total defeat and assumes her magical journey is over before it even began. Granz quickly scolds her for jumping to conclusions, firmly clarifying that he never once called her untalented. Startled, she listens as he confidently promises that she can easily cast spells once the proper conditions are met. Wide-eyed with disbelief, she asks if he is telling the truth, which he smoothly confirms. He logically explains that her past failures simply stem from trying to utilize highly ordinary and incompatible casting methods. Diving into magical theory, Granz reveals that her latent energy is entirely attributeless. He explains that traditional mages must output power matching their specific elemental affinity, making standard spells impossible for her. Flashing a brilliant smile, he happily notes that attributeless energy still possesses incredible magical utility. Raising two fingers, the brilliant prince declares he can already think of two perfect methods for her to utilize her unique power. He dramatically announces the first method involves utilizing powerful magic tools, causing Beatrice to gasp in sudden realization. Granz explains that activating these enchanted devices strictly requires raw energy rather than specific elemental attributes. Pointing directly at her, he conclusively declares that she is perfectly capable of mastering these magical artifacts. A warm, radiant smile graces Beatrice's face as she rejoices at the impossible miracle of finally wielding magic. Granz explains that magic tools are extremely rare and difficult to obtain, though he notes this shouldn't be an issue for a duke's daughter. The prince playfully predicts that the doting duke will probably shower her with endless magical artifacts. Beatrice nervously pictures a massive mountain of enchanted items, hoping her father won't go to such extremes. Luca chimes in, sweating nervously as he admits that buying an entire mountain of tools is genuinely possible for the overprotective duke. Pivoting the conversation, Granz prepares to reveal his second proposed method for wielding attribute-less magic. He dramatically states that she could harness the elusive and mystical power of spirits. Surprised by the mysterious concept, Beatrice softly repeats the word as she contemplates the daunting idea. Granz explains that forming a rare contract with a spirit allows a human to indirectly influence the raw forces of nature. The prince warns that most spirits lack self-awareness and almost never lend their formidable power to ordinary humans. He emphasizes that successfully forging a bond with these ethereal beings is an incredibly rare phenomenon. Despite the immense difficulty, the prince flashes a confident smile and declares it is absolutely worth trying. Granz reveals that the duke himself seemed capable of wielding spiritual power, making it entirely possible for his daughter to inherit the trait. Stunned by this shocking revelation, Beatrice questions how her father could possess such a mystical connection. She openly admits to the first prince that she has never once heard about her father communicating with spirits. Leaning in with a serious expression, Granz prepares to unveil the dark truth about the Duke's future rampage. He drops the terrifying bombshell that the spirits were the actual entities who drove the world toward complete destruction. Resonating with the Duke's apocalyptic grief, the enraged spirits unleashed cataclysmic earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons upon the fragile Earth. Granz solemnly declares that this divine wrath mercilessly marched humanity straight toward total extinction. The prince tragically notes that the spirits essentially engaged in self-destruction, violently harming nature just to mirror the Duke's endless despair. Gripping her dress, Beatrice stares downward as the horrific reality of the ruined future violently crushes her spirit. Though touched by their fierce loyalty to her father, she desperately wishes they could have chosen a path of mutual support instead of total ruin. Steeling her resolve, she vows to keep moving forward to prevent that tragic future from ever coming to pass. Looking up with fierce determination, she firmly accepts the challenge because the spirits are clearly the ultimate key to saving the world. Impressed by her unwavering courage, Granz smiles warmly and completely agrees with her strategic assessment. The prince notes that contacting spirits requires intense preparation and getting the Duke's approval will be their greatest obstacle. Deciding to tackle one challenge at a time, Granz suggests putting the spiritual matter on hold for the moment. Shifting his focus back to immediate training, the first prince announces they will now learn how to properly control her latent energy. He instructs her to focus as they begin by reviewing the absolute basics of magical theory. Granz seamlessly explains that magic power is a fundamental force born directly from nature itself. He details how mages absorb mana from nature-rich environments and internally convert it into usable magical energy. Listening intently, Beatrice realizes that magic power is intimately connected to the surrounding world in ways she never understood. She reflects bitterly that her previous abusive tutors deliberately withheld this foundational knowledge during her past life. Concluding his lecture, Granz decides the best way for her to learn is through forceful, hands-on experience. Beatrice stammers nervously as the towering prince gently asks to take her small hand in his. Grasping her hand, he instructs her to memorize the raw sensation as he channels his own magical power directly into her body. Suddenly, a sharp voice shatters the quiet intimacy and demands that the prince immediately release her. Startled by the abrupt intrusion, Beatrice gasps and questions how Aegis moved from the hallway so quickly. The fiercely loyal knight steps forward, unapologetically revealing that the Duke strictly ordered him to amputate the arm of anyone who touches his daughter. Granz stares in complete disbelief as the royal guard threatens him with literal dismemberment over a simple training exercise. Aegis rests his hand on his sword hilt and coldly warns that the Duke's brutal mandate applies to everyone, absolutely ignoring royal status. The tense standoff continues as the imposing knight glares silently at the first prince. Raising his hands in surrender, Granz reasons that he would rather keep both of his arms since Beatrice's immense magical power would have likely repelled him anyway. Satisfied with the prince's retreat, Aegis firmly announces he will resume his guard duty outside the room. Shifting tactics, Granz decides to switch to a classroom setting and promises to teach her how to circulate magic power on her own. He adds a quick caveat, promising to deliver the instructions purely verbally to avoid the knight's wrath. Later that night, Beatrice sits alone on her bed while bathed in the soft moonlight. Closing her eyes in deep concentration, she attempts to put the prince's magical theory into practice. Although she successfully felt her magic power move slightly during the lesson, she realizes it is not nearly enough and decides to try one more time. Clenching her fists with determination, she vows to improve her skills at least a little bit before her next lesson. A heavy silence fills the room as she continues to strain her intense concentration. Opening her eyes in profound frustration, she wonders what exactly she is doing wrong. She groans softly, lamenting that she can faintly sense her magic power but remains completely unable to make it move. Despite her allies urging her not to rush, crippling self-doubt creeps in as she fears remaining powerless forever. Overwhelmed by her lack of progress, Beatrice slumps forward and buries her face in her knees. Drowning in despair, she tragically concludes that she truly possesses no magical talent after all. Suddenly, a deep and familiar voice sharply calls out her name from the doorway. Jolting upright with a startled gasp, Beatrice stares in absolute shock at her father's imposing figure. Flustered by his sudden appearance, she frantically asks what he is doing in her room. The Duke casually explains that he came to check on her since she never came down for dinner, completely surprising her with the late hour. Panicking slightly, she profusely apologizes and promises to get ready right away. Stepping closer to her bed, the Duke softly murmurs her name once again. He gently places his massive, warm hand squarely against her forehead. A soothing magical aura washes over her as he calmly instructs her on how to properly move her magic power. Brilliant magical energy begins to cascade through her veins, guided entirely by her father's masterful control. He advises her to treat magic power like blood circulating naturally through her body rather than an external force she simply uses. Carefully tracing the magical pathway, he instructs her to cycle the energy from her fingertips back to her heart and repeat the process endlessly. Nodding earnestly, Beatrice absorbs every single word of his invaluable lesson. The Duke pulls his hand back, watching his daughter with a tender and observant gaze. Flashing a proud smile, he praises her incredible learning speed and affectionately calls her his precious daughter. He confidently declares that she should be fully capable of circulating the energy on her own now. Beatrice looks up with wide, hopeful eyes, utterly amazed by her sudden progress. Softening his expression, the Duke gently notes that it wouldn't matter even if she remained entirely unable to use magic. He firmly assures her that her mere existence holds immeasurable value and she never needs to change herself just to please others. Leaning in closely, he earnestly urges her to simply live her life exactly the way she desires. A profound sense of relief washes over Beatrice as her father's unconditional love instantly lightens her heavy heart. Staring down at her glowing hands, she honestly confesses her pure and simple desire to wield magic. The Duke nods in solemn understanding, fully respecting her unwavering determination. With a quick wave of his hand, he finally adjusts the magical flow and encourages her to try circulating it once more. Taking a deep breath, Beatrice focuses her intent and gasps in awe as the energy effortlessly responds. Beaming with absolute triumph, she excitedly shouts to her father that her magic power is finally flowing perfectly throughout her entire body. The Duke assures Beatrice that she should now be able to keep her magic circulating effortlessly without consciously directing its flow. Gazing warmly at his daughter, he softly praises her as a good girl for successfully mastering the delicate technique. Beatrice giggles happily as her father proudly declares that she possesses true magical talent and notes that this process normally takes much longer. Although she realizes she is still a long way from protecting herself, Beatrice feels deeply empowered by taking this crucial first step. A warm wave of genuine joy washes over her as she reflects on the incredible feeling of expanding her own capabilities. Fueled by her sudden progress, she excitedly suggests that she might even be ready to start practicing with magic tools tomorrow. The Duke raises an eyebrow in mild surprise and asks if she genuinely plans to incorporate magic tools into her upcoming lessons. Beatrice nods earnestly, explaining that her attribute-less magic power strictly requires either tools or spirits as a casting medium. Processing this crucial information, the Duke closes his eyes in solemn understanding of her unique magical condition. Eager to support her, he fiercely declares that he will personally procure the artifacts because he refuses to let her use anything less than perfect. Beatrice stammers nervously as she recalls Prince Granz's terrifyingly accurate prediction about her father showering her with endless gifts. She frantically tries to temper his enthusiasm, insisting that a single inexpensive tool is more than enough for a beginner still in training. Tilting his head in genuine confusion, the overprotective Duke questions why he would ever spare any expense for his precious daughter. Overwhelmed by his bottomless parental devotion, Beatrice can only groan softly while sweating in sheer defeat. Shifting his attention away from magic, the Duke gently suggests they finally head down to eat their delayed dinner. He kindly reminds her that delaying their meal any further will inevitably cause her to miss her strict bedtime. Smiling warmly at his paternal care, Beatrice happily agrees to follow him to the dining hall. As the Duke silently marvels at her extreme modesty and asks if she desires anything else, Beatrice desperately reiterates that one single magic tool is truly enough. Granz shouts in absolute shock, demanding to know if Beatrice has already mastered magic circulation. Beatrice reacts nervously to the prince's sudden and loud outburst. She quickly clarifies that her father actually helped her achieve it, causing Granz to marvel at her amazing progress regardless. Glancing at the items, Granz notes that the Duke predictably showered her with magic tools exactly as he had foreseen. Shifting focus, Granz excitedly declares that they can now move to the next stage since she will easily master activating these tools. Taking a deep breath, Beatrice realizes that conquering spirits will be her next massive challenge. Granz affirms that the spirits and their command over nature are undoubtedly the key to preventing the world's inevitable destruction. Filled with determination, Beatrice earnestly expresses her desire to meet the spirits right away. The prince promises to try and persuade the protective duke regarding the spirits as soon as possible. Pivoting back to the present, Granz suggests testing her newly mastered magic circulation using a physical tool. He advises starting with a magic tool that she is already highly familiar with. Beatrice ponders the suggestion carefully while scanning the lavish assortment of gifts. Recalling a recent event, she suggests using the communication magic tool she handled the other day. Granz holds up the specific device to confirm her choice. Noting its simple mechanism, Granz explains that the tool activates automatically once the supplied magic power reaches a specific threshold. He instructs her to channel her energy slowly and warns that she must constantly supply magic power while the tool remains active. To help her visualize, he advises imagining a calm river flowing in a steady stream about as thin as a piece of chalk. Sweating nervously, Beatrice stammers that maintaining such delicate control sounds incredibly difficult. Granz seriously warns that since her latent magic capacity is on a terrifyingly massive scale, a simple slip in control could instantly destroy the tool's storage component. Acknowledging the danger, Granz turns to Luca to coordinate their next move. Leaving Beatrice's immediate support to the spectral mage, the prince announces he will move to another room to receive the communication. A brief moment of silence passes as Granz departs to set up the connection. Waiting in the quiet room, Luca decides that enough time has passed for Granz to prepare. Urging Beatrice forward, Luca instructs her to channel her magic into the tool while noting that the device cannot recognize his spectral presence. Taking a deep breath, Beatrice focuses her intent and carefully channels her energy into the artifact. The communication device suddenly flares to life, prompting a surprised reaction from the prince on the other end. Granz smiles through the magical projection and praises her for succeeding on her very first attempt. Staring at her glowing hands in pure awe, Beatrice whispers in joyous disbelief that she actually wielded magic. Granz instructs her to maintain the connection for 30 minutes to get the hang of it, to which she eagerly agrees while magical sparkles float around her. A brief, awkward silence stretches as Beatrice internally panics about what they should actually discuss for half an hour. She glances nervously through the projection, struggling to find a suitable conversation topic. Granz watches her carefully, his expression shifting into a serious, contemplative gaze. Breaking the silence, the first prince admits he has been heavily debating whether to bring up a certain delicate topic. Startled by his sudden shift in tone, Beatrice nervously urges him to continue. Leaning in through the projection, Granz bluntly states that there is clearly something she desperately wants to tell him. Beatrice flinches in absolute shock as the prince pierces right through her carefully constructed facade. Granz reveals he has noticed her strange behavior since they reunited at the estate, noting that her avoidance stems from something much deeper than simple dislike. Piercing her soul with an intense glare, the prince directly asks if her hesitation is driven by profound guilt or regret. Hovering nearby, Luca watches the intense confrontation and silently praises the first prince's incredible intuition. The spectral mage acknowledges that Granz is terrifyingly skilled at reading people's hidden expressions and the subtle, guarded movements of their hearts. Granz gently suggests that speaking might actually be easier while they are physically separated by the magic tool. Reassuring her with a warm smile, the prince promises he won't get angry and encourages her to speak her mind. Beatrice stares at the magical projection, visibly wrestling with her deep-seated anxieties. Sensing her hesitation, Granz kindly adds that it is perfectly fine if she prefers to stay silent. Floating nearby, Luca confirms that Granz truly will not lose his temper over whatever she has to say. The spectral mage urges her to settle things here, pointing out that clearing the air is vital for the trials ahead. Beatrice nervously glances at Luca, worrying that ignoring the prince's reassurance would be incredibly rude. Luca quickly dismisses her fears, reminding her that as the beloved daughter of the Duke of Light, her father would gladly send anyone flying if they dared complain. Gathering her fractured courage, Beatrice finally calls out Prince Granz's name through the glowing magical connection. Staring into the projection, she hesitantly asks the first prince if he secretly resents her. Taken completely off guard by the question, Granz blinks in surprise and asks why she would ever assume that. Beatrice lowers her gaze in shame, explaining that everything derailed the moment she became engaged to Gerald. She boldly states that Prince Granz was the rightful heir and should have become the next emperor. Drowning in guilt, she confesses that her engagement gave Gerald the ducal family's absolute backing, allowing him to steal the throne. Grans thoughtfully acknowledges that her mere existence indeed had a massive and undeniable impact on the vicious succession struggle. However, he quickly asks if she ever actively abused her powerful position to bring him down, which she vehemently denies. Smiling with absolute certainty, the first prince concludes that he has absolutely no logical reason to resent her. He humbly admits he lost the throne simply because he lacked capability, declaring that blaming others for his own failure would be entirely wicked. Deeply moved by his profound grace, Beatrice softly whispers his name as a massive weight lifts from her chest. Embracing his second chance, Grans confidently vows that he absolutely will not lose the succession battle this time around. Beatrice gazes at the magical projection in pure awe, marveling at the prince's incredible internal strength. Flashing a bright, genuine smile, she enthusiastically tells His Highness that she is fully rooting for his victory. Grans chuckles warmly and thanks her, reassuring the young lady that he is firmly on her side as well. Glancing at the magic tool, the prince notes that their allotted time for the magical connection is nearly up. Observing her perfectly stable magic flow, he promises to see her shortly and ends the long-distance transmission. Staring at the fading magical sparkles, Beatrice is absolutely thrilled that she successfully operated the complex magic tool. More importantly, she clutches her chest in pure relief, incredibly glad she finally managed to clear the air with His Highness. A month later, Aegis excitedly coaches Beatrice in archery, urging his young lady to relax her tense shoulders. The energetic knight shouts for her to finally release the drawn string and take her shot. Beatrice lets the string snap forward, sending a glowing projectile slicing perfectly through the air. Aegis cheers loudly as the arrow hits its mark, enthusiastically praising her remarkable improvement. Concluding the day's practice, the knight declares that starting tomorrow, they will advance to hitting moving targets with rapid succession. Sweating nervously, Beatrice doubts her own abilities, wondering how she can handle rapid fire when she barely manages single shots. Lowering her weapon, she reflects on how an entire month has already passed while she diligently practiced with various magical tools. She admires the specialized bow in her hands, noting it is actually a powerful magic tool designed to instantly produce arrows made of sheer wind. Watching from the sidelines, Luca proudly acknowledges that she is progressing remarkably well for an absolute beginner. Glancing away from the training grounds, the spectral mage bitterly points out that their real problem lies elsewhere. Inside the mansion, Grans and the Duke sit across from one another in a remarkably tense and suffocating standoff. Luca groans in frustration, revealing that the fiercely protective Duke has violently rejected every single proposal to let Beatrice meet the spirits. Sighing heavily, the mage notes that dealing with the Duke's legendary overprotectiveness is going to be an agonizing uphill battle. Frustrated instructors note that the Duke demanded to watch the training, strictly forbade swords, and imposed numerous difficult conditions. Attempting to de-escalate the rising tension, someone gently tries to calm the exasperated group. Smiling warmly, Beatrice explains that she considers her father's troublesome rules to simply be another expression of his deep love. The intense physical training session continues as the combatants silently clash on the field. Dust kicks up from the ground as the fierce sparring match rapidly escalates. Suddenly, a panicked voice screams out a desperate warning for someone to watch out. A rapid movement shocks the combatants as an unexpected force forcefully intervenes. Stepping onto the field, the Duke abruptly interrupts the session and states he needs to speak with Beatrice immediately. Onlookers whisper in sheer terror, calling him an absolute monster for displaying such terrifying power without even using magic. Asking to pause the lesson, he waits calmly as Beatrice confirms they have just finished their grueling sparring. With a heavy, solemn tone, he affectionately calls out his daughter's name. Staring intently at her, he directly asks Beatrice if she truly wants to meet the spirits. Overwhelmed by his sudden consideration, Beatrice softly murmurs her father's name in awe. Glowing with pure joy, she reflects on how incredibly happy it makes her that he always asks what she truly wants. She gazes up at him, her expression filled with deep affection and unspoken gratitude. Steeling her resolve, she confidently declares that she would indeed like to meet the spirits. She explains her burning desire to witness the beings who lend their power, even if she ultimately cannot form a bond with them herself. Deep down, she secretly hopes that gaining their acceptance will give her the strength needed to change her tragic future. Acknowledging her earnest request, her father solemnly agrees to her wishes. He officially grants his daughter permission to embark on the highly anticipated field study. Setting one absolute condition, he insists on accompanying her and asks if she accepts. Beatrice eagerly agrees, brightly admitting that she would actually feel much safer with him by her side. Blushing slightly, she realizes with bursting excitement that this will be her very first time going out with him. Catching herself, she quickly clarifies her understanding that this is a serious lesson rather than just a fun outing. Unbeknownst to her, the Duke completely loses his composure, obsessively vowing to prepare thoroughly to make their first outing the finest memory possible. Ignoring his subordinate's desperate scolding about repeatedly leaving through the window, the Duke gleefully leaps away into the distance. Back at the training grounds, an instructor notes that they can finally proceed with the plan to meet the spirits. A companion agrees things will be fine, though they sweat drop at how the Duke seemingly lost sight of the objective at the very end. Acknowledging the plan, Beatrice is gently reminded to properly thank Granz later for his assistance. Gazing up at the sky, she hopes with all her heart that she will actually get to meet the magical beings. 2 eventful weeks quickly pass by in preparation for the monumental journey. The lush, sprawling scenery of the expedition grounds finally comes into clear view. The royal travel party successfully arrives at their grand destination. Calling out affectionately, the Duke summons Beatrice over, and she obediently steps forward. The group gathers together, taking in the breathtaking sights of their new natural surroundings. The serene atmosphere of the secluded field study location envelopes the traveling party. Suddenly, a bizarre sight causes someone to let out a puzzled sound of utter confusion. An attendant nervously calls out to His Grace, completely bewildered by his unexpected antics. Sighing in weary resignation, the defeated attendant gives up and tells the Duke to just do whatever he wants. The chaotic scene comes to a humorous close as the group braces for the unpredictable field study ahead. Gazing at the vehicle, Beatrice questions if they are truly traveling to the forest in this particular carriage. An attendant smoothly explains that the carriage is actually a magic tool powered entirely by a specialized device. Staring in awe, Beatrice wonders just how much magic power her father possesses to operate such an enormous magical contraption. Expressing concern for their well-being, a maid politely urges everyone to be careful and avoid overexerting themselves. Bowing respectfully, the household staff bid the departing royals a safe journey. Magic flares as the majestic carriage smoothly lifts off the solid ground. Startled by the sudden elevation, Beatrice realizes with shock that they are actually flying through the sky. Pressing her hands against the glass, she eagerly points out the window and tells her father how amazing this is. Admiring her father's incredible capabilities, she assumes he must have been incredibly excited to prepare such a magnificent magic tool. The magical carriage soars effortlessly high above the thick white clouds. Beatrice remains captivated by the breathtaking view unfolding before her eyes. Marveling at the beautiful scenery, she enthusiastically calls out for her father to look at the sky. Watching her joyful reactions, the maids cover their mouths and giggle warmly. One maid fondly notes how refreshing and adorable it is to see the usually mature Lady Beatrice acting like a normal child. Catching the giggles, Beatrice blushes furiously and wonders if her excited outburst was a little too childish. The Duke simply watches his daughter with a remarkably warm and tender expression. Leaning forward gently, he asks Beatrice if she is enjoying herself on this trip. Smiling brightly, she immediately confirms that she is having a truly wonderful time. A soft, satisfied smile graces the Duke's usually stoic face. Eager to please her, the Duke offers to detour toward a flower field he researched specifically for her enjoyment. A stern attendant instantly shuts the Duke down, bluntly ordering him to restrain his excitement to avoid wasting time and magic power. Breaking the sudden tension, Beatrice lets out a nervous little laugh. Smiling politely, she softly promises her father that she would love to visit the flower field another time. Dejected but agreeable, the Duke respectfully accepts her compromise. Feeling a surge of warmth, Beatrice realizes her father made extensive preparations just to see her look so happy. Grounding herself, she remembers that their primary goal today is to actually find the spirits. Seeking confirmation, she asks the attendant if spirits with a sense of self can manifest physically in the world. The attendant confirms this but warns that the spirits choosing to reveal themselves depends entirely upon their own unpredictable whims. Announcing their arrival, the attendant warns the passengers that they are finally descending into the forest. The flying carriage touches down smoothly amid the dense, untamed woodland. The heavy carriage door swings open to reveal the mysterious forest outside. Beatrice fidgets nervously as she finds herself in a highly compromising position. Trapped in her father's grasp, she internally screams while wondering just how long she is supposed to remain carried in his arms. Squirming in embarrassment, she insists to her father that she is perfectly capable of walking by herself. The Duke firmly refuses, declaring the forest too dangerous and vowing to carry her until they reach their destination. Defeated by his overprotectiveness, Beatrice blushes deeply and laments how utterly embarrassing this is. A subordinate steps forward to report that the advance unit has successfully secured a safe route through the woods. Satisfied with the security, the Duke commands the party to head toward the nearest great tree. Carried effortlessly through the woods, Beatrice silently reflects on their incredible journey here. She realizes her father prepared an enormous magic tool and researched extensively just to ensure her absolute safety and happiness. This profound realization fills her heart with joy because she can genuinely feel the immense depth of her father's love. The royal party treks deeper into the quiet, atmospheric depths of the ancient forest. Hoping to reward her father's monumental efforts, Beatrice silently prays they will successfully meet the spirits today. The dense tree suddenly breaks, revealing a massive clearing ahead. A colossal, ancient tree looms magnificently over the small traveling party. Staring upward in pure shock, Beatrice stammers at the sheer, enormous scale of the legendary tree. Without warning, a sudden disturbance in the air catches the group's immediate attention. Sensing danger, the Duke urgently screams Beatrice's name as she lets out a startled gasp. Throwing a protective arm in front of her, he commands her to stay back and fiercely orders her never to leave his side under any circumstances.